Hello everyone and welcome to Project Insights Product Training webinar. The topic for today is Baseline, Auto-Reschedule, and Advanced Scheduling. Just a few things to note before we get started. All participants will be put on mute. However, any questions you have are more than welcome. Please go ahead and type those into your question box, which you can find on your GoToWebinar dashboard. We will try to answer all of your questions during the session, but if we can't, we'll make sure to get to you through email before the end of the day, or you can also feel free to email us your questions at info@projectinsight.net. Also, do know this webinar recording will be available within our Project Insight community. My name is Denise, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm on the marketing team here at Project Insight. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to reach me at denise.rodriguez@projectinsight.com. Our presenter and trainer for today will be Angie Smith. She is our partner out in Canada, and she is also PMP certified. Some of the benefits of today's webinar is to learn when to use constraints and why, understand the power of tasks that auto-reschedule, and how and when to set baselines. On our agenda today, we'll know the difference between task auto-calculate versus default calculation, learn the settings and saving baselines, auto-rescheduling tasks, we'll learn how to use constraints, and we'll review the cross-project task dependencies, do's and don'ts. So with that said, I will hand this over on to Angie to continue with the rest of today's webinar. Angie, welcome.
Great, thank you, Denise. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show my screen. So everybody should be seeing the Project Insight screen, and just if you have any issues or anything with that, just go ahead and let us know in the chat box. All right, so baselines is what we're going to talk about first in our session today. And a project baseline is used to measure how performance of your project deviates from your original plans. Your performance measurement is only going to be meaningful if you have an accurate baseline. Now, a project baseline is defined as the original scope, cost, and schedule. And a project baseline must be completely defined and documented before the project execution and control activities can begin. Now, best practice is to create a baseline after your detailed planning is done and has been approved. That means you will have a record of what was initially agreed upon, and you can see variances from that as the project progresses. Now, baselines in Project Insight may only be created by project managers or project schedulers on the project, and they can be used in conjunction with the change order functionality to track and manage the life cycle of your project. So to create a baseline, you need to navigate to the task list view of your project. So to do that, you can click on the Projects folder, or if you have the Projects component showing on your dashboard, which I do in this case, then you can simply go ahead and click on the project name. Then you will see the task list views, and that's what we're on right now is the task list. And I'm just going to collapse that so we're just looking at a condensed list of all of our tasks. And if you're not on the task list, you can go to Views and click on Task List, or simply click on Views. So the other way we talked about was going to Projects and looking at your Projects folder and then clicking on the project that you're looking at as well. And once you do that, you can actually hide your left navigation, so it just gives you more room and more screen real estate to work with. Now, to see the child tasks of any of your summary tasks in your project schedule, you can click on the arrow next to the child task to expand that out. So you can see all of the child tasks, you can see the duration assigned to them, also the work hours assigned to them, and any resources that are assigned to do the work on the task. And you can make any of your columns bigger just by hovering in the blue header bar of the column and dragging it left or right. Now, to set a baseline for this current data, you're going to hover on the Views menu option and you're going to select Options. Let's get rid of that. And you're going to go ahead and click on the Project Baseline tab. Now, the first thing that you need to do is enter in the name of the baseline. So we're going to type in Original Plan and click Create New Baseline. Then you're going to see the baseline name listed along with the date that it was created and who it was created by. So go ahead and click on your Views menu option to return to the task list view. Now, in our scenario, it's assumed that this detailed project plan has been approved, and you also created a baseline to capture that original information. So actually, let's go back and go to our Views and our Options, Project Baseline, and we've got that created again, so as of that data that was currently there. Now, if there was a change from this original approved plan, you're going to want to discuss it with your stakeholders and all that kind of thing before you actually implement that. But if you want to compare what you agreed upon with your stakeholders from your current plan, you can click on the Display Options icon and go into the column selection options to make sure that's expanded out if it's not already. So just go ahead and click on that. And then we have an option in here to show the baseline as a separate row. So we're going to click on that, and we're going to click on the Update Display icon. And then you'll see that what happens is there is a gray line that's created for each summary and each child task. So this is the current baseline data for that task. Now, if we go ahead and we turn that off again, and we make some changes, so we've agreed maybe that our determined project scope is going to take longer time. So let's change this to 8 days. And maybe we actually want to increase it to 64 hours, so it's going to take us quite a while to do that over what we originally anticipated. And we save that. Now, if we go and show our baseline as a separate row, we're going to see for our determined project scope, this is what we've got it set to now, but the gray line shows us what it was originally set to. And so you can see all those different changes that have occurred. Now, if you also scroll, what this does, so all of the information, of course, in all of your child tasks rolls up to your summary tasks. So you can see also at the summary task level that originally it was 12 days and 76 work hours. Now it's 16 days and 108 work hours. And if you scroll to the bottom of the project, you're going to see what that original baseline was as well. And then you're also going to see what it is currently. So we can see that the original baseline had it ending on February 3rd, 2016, and now with those changes, it's going to end on February 9th. So Project Insight will actually allow you to add multiple baselines against your project so that you can track not only your original baselines, but also any other changes that occur as the project progresses. So the change management process is covered in some other training sessions, but for now, assume that the change you made was just approved, and this is going to now become your new baseline on which you're managing your project going forward. So you want to capture that in another baseline. So again, we're going to hover on the Views and select Options. Click on our Project Baseline tab, and we're going to enter in the name of the next baseline. So let's call this Change Order Number 1, and we're going to click on Create New Baseline. So you're going to see that new baseline name listed along with the date, again, that it was created and who it was created by. So a lot of our teams develop a naming convention that will correspond with their baselines so that everybody's kind of using the same standard naming. And you may create new baselines when you have change orders, or you even may maintain baselines on a monthly or quarterly basis as well. So how and when you set these baselines is going to depend on the business process of your organization. Now, when you have multiple baselines like we do here, one of those baselines is always going to be set as the current one. So if you add a new baseline, that new one is automatically set as the current one. And you can see that the change order number 1 baseline is set as the current, where that original plan baseline was set as the previous baseline. So now when you click on Views and you have your baseline showing, it's showing you the current baseline. So the current baseline was set to be change order number 1, and so that's the one that's showing. So if we're looking at that, you can see there's no changes between what the baseline is and our current schedule because we haven't made any changes to our schedule since that baseline was created. Now to change the current baseline, just go back to the Views and select Options and click on the project baseline, and then you want to click on the Set as Current option on the original plan baseline. So we want to set the original plan back as our current baseline. So we're going to set that. And now the status of the original plan shows that it's the current one. Now if we click back on Views, you can see that in our determined project scope, there is again a difference because now it's showing us our original baseline, not the change order baseline. Now another place to view the current baseline against your project is from the Gantt chart. So to do that, hover on the Views menu option and select Gantt chart. And then you want to click on your display options icon. And again in here there's an option to show the baseline as a separate row. So we'll click on that and click the update display icon. So now in your Gantt chart view, you're going to see a gray line beneath each task that represents the baseline data. So you can see for our scoping task, this is what the plan is currently reflecting, but this is what it was showing in the original baseline. And if we click on the arrow next to the scope to expand it out, you're going to see all the child tasks, and you're going to see the baseline for those child tasks as well. So you can see for the determined project scope task, this was the original duration of that task, but now it's extended out. Basically, it's twice as long as it was originally. And then you can also see when the successor tasks were scheduled to start as well. And then you can also see where they're starting with the changes that we've made. Now, if you wanted to see all of your baselines and not just the current one, then you can do that with project reports. But before I show you that, let's go ahead and make a change to our current project schedule again. And let's assume that the project scope increased, and so now you need 2 resources to complete it. So we're going to right-click on the determined project scope task. We're going to hover on the Edit Task Inline and go to Edit Resources. And then in the resource dropdown, we're going to add another resource to this. So I'm going to assign Andrea. Now, it gives us some options when we add resources about what we want to do with the number of hours. So we're just going to assign Andrea 64 hours as well. So we're going to increase the total work required to determine the project scope to 128 hours. So we're going to click on that. And then we're going to go ahead and click the Save icon. So now the duration, let's see what our duration is. I'm just going to scroll back here. So our duration is we didn't extend our duration when we added another resource, but maybe we want to do that. So we can actually, sorry, I'll just get rid of that. Click on that task and also extend the duration out as well. So if we needed to do it a little bit longer, we can extend it out. And again, you're going to have some kind of approval process in place to manage and approve these changes. So now we've got basically our original baseline, we've got our change order baseline, but in addition, we've also changed our project again to add an additional resource with some more hours. So let's go to our reports icon. And we're going to go into here and we're going to click on project reports. And we're going to click on create project report. And then the column selection options, you're going to click on that to expand that out. And then in this section over here on the right-hand side under other options, you can see that you have show the current baseline as a separate row. So let's go ahead and click on that. And that shows the current baseline information as a separate row on the report, similar to what you saw on the task list view. But we can also click on show all baselines rows as separate rows. And this shows all the baselines that you have for each project. Now, you just want to note that if you, click on show all baselines as separate rows, and you don't have the first one clicked, you always want to make sure that they're checked so they're showing both options here. Now, before you run the report, you want to change the columns of data that you have showing. So, for example, maybe you want to show how the cost of the work hours changed and not just the hours themselves. So in that case, we're going to go to the available columns and we're going to scroll to the bottom and we're going to click on work total. So that moves it to the selected columns, and we can click on it and reposition it by using our up and down arrow keys. So we'll maybe put it next to the work hours. And then we're going to run the report. So now you can see that for the software development project, there's two baselines. I'm just going to, again, drag my header bar a little bit bigger. We've got our original baseline that we saved, and then we also have our change order number 1 baseline. And you can scroll over and you can see the work total values. You know, we basically started at 37, then we went to 39, and now the current plan is showing that we're up to around $43,000 for the total cost. Then you can also see the hours went from 785 to 817 to 881. You can also see that the start and the end dates have changed. And yeah, you'll also see if the percent complete was being changed as we've gone along, you'll see that reflected as well. Okay, so if we go ahead and just click on the software development project to go back to the task list views, you can see that our baseline is still showing, and that's because Project Insight remembered that for this project, this was the view you were last using. So this is another usability feature that can minimize the number of clicks that you need to perform. If you don't want to view the baseline information, then you can just simply turn it off by going to your display options icon and clicking on the show baseline as a separate row to uncheck it, and then click your update display icon. So that's baselines. And the next topic that you're going to see is the auto-rescheduling of tasks. Now, a lot of organizations will leave it up to the project managers to be responsible for rescheduling tasks. For example, if a task gets delayed, then the project manager will manually change the start date and the end date of the task to reflect that. Or they may build in some lead and lag to reflect that as well. So there's different techniques that they'll use. However, some organizations want Project Insight to automatically reschedule tasks if their predecessor tasks are not completed on time. So for example, if we can see for the secure project sponsorship, if I click on the predecessors column header and drag it a little bit bigger so I can see the entire text, I can see that for secure project sponsorship, my determined project scope had to be completed first before this one starts. Now let's go ahead and right-click on our task, which has some predecessors, such as, let's go down and let's have a look at our scope complete. So I'm going to right-click on that. I'm going to hover on the Edit Task Inline, and then I'm going to select Edit Task Full. And this brings up our full task at edit form. So I'm going to click on the Advanced tab, and here's kind of all the different options we have in the Advanced tab. But I'm going to go down to this section here that says Task Auto-Rescheduling Options. So by default, a task does not auto-reschedule, but you can change that by clicking in the drop-down for the auto-rescheduling type and selecting Delay until predecessors are marked complete. So this means that even though this task is scheduled to start on a certain date, if that date comes around, but all of its predecessors are not marked complete, then the start date of this task will be automatically delayed by the system. So the next field, Increase Delay By, indicates the number of days or hours to delay the task. So we're going to enter 1 day in the days field, and you can also delay it by hours and minutes, and you'd enter that in this field if that's what you wanted to do. But we'll just leave it as 1 day for now, and we're going to click Save. So you can see that the Scope Complete task is scheduled to start on a certain date. But if that date comes around and all of its predecessors' tasks are not marked complete, then the start date of this task is now going to be automatically rescheduled to start 1 day later than what we've got indicated here. And this will all be performed without the project manager intervention. So when a delay in the duration does occur, Project Insight records that in a duration delay column so that the project manager can see what has happened. So to see that column, you can click on the Display Options icon. Then we're going to click in Duration in the selected columns because you want your new column to appear right before this column. Then in your available columns, we're going to click in here, and then we're going to type in the letter D, and that'll get the system to automatically scroll down to all the columns that start with the letter D. And then we can just scroll down a little ways till we find something called duration delay. And we're going to double click on that to move it over to our selected columns, and you can see it put it just before my duration. And then we'll click the Update Display icon. Now we can click in the duration delay to expand it out, and then if that situation occurred where a task was automatically delayed because the predecessors were not marked complete when it was scheduled to start, then it's going to put that duration delay figure in here so that you as the project manager can see that it was automatically rescheduled. So Project Insight will automatically set that duration delay, but you as a project manager or scheduler can also hard code a delay in. So again, let's right click on our Scope Complete task, Edit Task Inline, hover on the Edit Task Full and click on that, then go back to the Advanced tab, and we're going to scroll down. And we're looking for this field here called Duration Delay. So this is where you can hard code in a delay. So let's put in 5 days. And then we'll go ahead and we'll click Save. So you can see now that in that duration delay column, that 5 days is now appearing. And you can also see that the Scope Complete start date has been delayed 5 days from the end date of the previous task. So instead of starting on September 25th, which is what it would have started before, it's actually starting now on October 2nd. Now, another option for auto-rescheduling is by using the actual start dates of a task. So when you're setting up this project schedule, you're using the intelligent scheduling and task dependencies to determine the scheduled start and end dates for your tasks. And, kind of another way to say that is that you're entering in the planned start and end dates for the tasks. And it's always a best practice to use Project Insight's intelligent scheduling when you can. Now, with good planning, a good work breakdown structure, and good estimates, your actual start dates should be the same as your planned start dates. But of course, as project managers, you know that in reality, that is not always the case. So if you wish, your team members can enter in the actual start and end date of tasks as they do their work. Or you can also set up Project Insight to set the actual start and end dates of tasks automatically based on when time is entered or the task status is updated. In either case, you can have Project Insight recalculate the schedule based on what those actual start and end dates are. So to have the system do that, let's right-click on the task, such as Secure Core Resources, hover on the Edit Task Inline and select Edit Task Full, click on the Advanced tab, and then you want to look for this option called Calc from Actual Dates. So if we click on that to turn it on, it's going to recalculate the schedule based on the actual start and end dates that are entered in the system. Now, a few best practices if you do this. The first being that you should ensure auto alerts are set up to notify project managers of task scheduled start and end date changes. And that topic is covered in more detail in some other training sessions. You're also going to want to review the option called Enable the Task Owner to set the actual start dates. And that's right here. So this sets whether or not you want the task owner to be able to enter actual dates, or do you want the system to calculate them based on different criteria. Now these criteria are set in the task actual start date auto population and the task actual end date auto population settings. So basically, if you click on that, you can see that there's some different options that you can have those actual start dates populated by. So you can actually have it auto-populated with the scheduled date, the percent complete updated date, the percent completed updated date and time, or the time entry date. So there's different options that you can set to have your actual start and end dates auto-populated. Or you can also enable the task owner to set them manually as well. Now, another advanced scheduling feature is the use of constraint dates. So to see how those work, we're going to click on the Views menu option to return to the task list view. And Project Insight has task dependencies and the intelligent scheduling features to help you schedule your projects. And those were all covered in our training session that actually happened earlier this week called Leveraging Task Dependencies and Intelligent Scheduling. But in certain circumstances, you can hard code the dates on projects, or another way we have of saying that is to put in constraint dates. Now to do that, you first want to most likely update your display again with those columns. So we're going to click on the display options icon, and again in this column selection options section, we're going to click on resources because we want to insert our new columns just before that automatically. And in the available columns, we're just going to click on any field in there and type the letter C to go to the columns that start with the letter C. And again, we need to scroll a little bit to find the one that we're looking for. And that's this constraint date and constraint type. So we're going to double click on both of those to move those over into our display, and then update our display by clicking on the Update Display icon. So now you can see that we've got a constraint date and a constraint type. But right now, the constraint date is empty because we're letting Project Insight automatically schedule our tasks based on the project start date and our dependencies. And we've also got the constraint type as soon as possible. So again, it's also scheduling based on that. But you can enter in hard-coded dates. For example, maybe you know that the scope complete task has to be done by a certain date because your manager is scheduled to do a live webinar for all your investors outlining the scope information. So that date can't change. It's hard-coded, and maybe it's been advertised and announced on social media. You know, some other activities have gone on that makes that a hard-coded or constraint date. So to enter that date, double-click anywhere on the white space of the scope complete task to go into edit mode. Then click in the drop-down for the constraint type, and you can see that there are various constraint type options available. So we're going to click Must Start On. Then for the constraint date, we're going to click on the calendar icon, and we're going to select the start date of the next month. So we're going to say, let's say September 1st, which is when that webinar that we've been talking about is going to be scheduled. And then we're going to hit Enter to save that. Now, you'll see then that the constraint date gets set to our September 1st, and we have a Must Start On constraint type. So you can see that the start date for the task has now been set to that constraint date. And you can see that the duration delay that we had entered previously got removed. And also, if we did have some tasks that were successors to this one, they're basically going to be ignored. So the constraint date and constraint type that you enter in override any of the other scheduling options, such as a duration delay or predecessors. Now we can enter in other constraint options as well. So let's click on the edit icon for that task and click in the drop-down for the constraint type. You can also say things like it must finish on instead of starting on. So if we click on that, and you could use that one if your task had a duration entered. So for example, if we had like a 5 days duration, and we'll go ahead and enter that and then save it. So basically now the constraint date is that it must finish on or by Tuesday, September 1st at 8 a.m. So that means it's going to set in the end date to the day before at 5 p.m. and then also schedule the start date to 5 days before that. And let's see a couple of the other ones. If we click the edit icon again, click in the drop down for the constraint type, maybe we want to put in a finish no later than this time. So that means it would finish no later than the constraint date, but it could be started earlier than that 5 days as long as it was finished sometime before that date. And it doesn't have to finish on that specific date, just sometime before that. Then you also have options such as finish no earlier than, which means you don't want the task to finish before a specific date. Or you could start no earlier than or start no later than. So there's, various options that are available. And they are, reflected in they use this constraint date and the constraint type to figure all that data out. Now, if I set this back to as soon as possible, basically any constraint dates that you entered will be ignored, but it's always a best practice that if you're going to use the constraint type of as soon as possible, that you just remove any constraint dates that you enter in and then click Save. And then when you're finished working with any kind of constraint dates and types, you may no longer want them on your task list view, so you can click on your display options icon and then click in the drop-down for the quick selection and just turn it back to our planning view, which is one of our default views, and then click the Update Display icons to change it back to that default view. Now, the last feature you're going to see in this session is the use of cross-project dependencies. This is a very unique feature that not a lot of other mid-market project and portfolio management solutions have. But it's a very beneficial feature because it allows you to tie the schedule of tasks in one project to tasks in another project. So this can save your organization money and can also save your team valuable time. So for example, if you have multiple projects going on that require work to be done in the same geographical area, you can use cross-project dependencies to link them together and optimize the use of resources in the field. And this can cut your travel time and costs and increase profitability on those projects. So to see how that all works, let's right-click on the Scope Complete task, hover on the Edit Task Inline, and this time we're actually going to edit our predecessors. So that brings up our Edit Predecessor layer, and you can see in here that if we're selecting a predecessor task, there's no way to select a different project. If you click in the drop-down, it just lists all the tasks that are on this current project. But let's click X to close that layer, and let's create now a cross-project dependency, and I'm also going to cancel that edit. So the first step in creating a cross-project dependency is to create a relationship between the two projects. And to do this, you must be a project manager or scheduler. So hover on the Views menu option and select Options. Click on the Cross Project Dependency tab, then click Add or Remove External Projects for Cross-Project Task Dependencies. Then in the Project drop-down, click in that and select the project you want to create a dependency with. So in this case, it's going to be the Database Development Project, and then we click the Add icon. So that project is now listed. Now if we go back to the Views menu option, and we go back and we right-click on our Scope Complete task, we go to Edit Task Inline and Edit Predecessors, you can now see in our Predecessors layer that since you've linked it to another project, there is a project top drop-down as well as a task drop-down. So the current project here is always our default project, or the one you're working in, but to add dependencies for tasks for another project, just click in that drop-down and change it to the other project. Then click in the task drop-down, and what it's doing is it's now listing all the tasks from that other project. So you can click on one to select it as the project that this one is dependent on, and then click Save. So now this project is going to be scheduled both according to the successor task, Secure Core Resources, plus the database development initial scope meeting task that's in our other project that we created a cross-project dependency with. So one rule to keep in mind is when you are creating cross-project dependencies this way, don't set up a dependency in both projects. Create a link here and then create, you only want it the link only going one way. You don't want to go to this database development project and link it back to the software development project. You don't want the links going both ways. The best practice is just to have the link from one project to the other. So that concludes our topics for today's session. And so I'm going to go ahead and hand that back over to Denise for some closing slides. Denise.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angie. All right. So for those of you that are on social media, I'd like to invite you to follow us, like us, and subscribe to all our social media channels. Our handle on Twitter is @ProjectInsight. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and now YouTube. you're not already a Project Insight user and would like to learn more, please feel free to reach us via phone, email, or request your demo at projectinsight.net. In our Project Insight community, you'll find many recorded videos and webinars for you to watch and learn from. You can sign up for your next product training, project management training, or IT methodology training. So that is all we have for you today. We'd like to thank Angie for a great session, and of course, we'd like to thank our audience as usual for your time, and we hope to have you on board next time. Thank you so much, and have a great day.